I'm Richard Friedman, and welcome to my video cartoon for March 4th, 2026. Here we have Marco Rubio being asked by a reporter on why President Trump did not go to Congress before launching this Iran war and so forth attacks. And he responds by saying this, here, there, I'll read it to you there. Here we have Marco Rubio. He is the Secretary of State and also holds another position as National Security Advisor to President Trump. Okay, so there he goes now answering that question. There was no need for Congress to weigh in on this attack on Iran because there was absolutely an imminent threat. There was an imminent threat in that we would have suffered more casualties and deaths if we had waited for them to attack us after Israel attacked them. So basically, Secretary of State Marco Rubio is saying that he anticipated a chain reaction would occur as a result of the Israeli who went first. They went first, and they did bomb Iran first before us. So in that sequence, as soon as they did that, Iran would start to attack us, and we would be caught flat-footed, and more deaths and casualties would have happened. So he's saying basically that the United States was basically being piggybacked by Israel. We're like a little piggyback, you know. So anyway, the thing is that President Trump, he kind of went ahead. He went ahead and refuted that, and he said this here. Here he is watching Marco Rubio in that interview, and President Trump is responding here. Here he is, and he's saying, "Thumbs up for my decision to strike Iran without having any rhinos," means Republican in name only, that he calls Republicans who are against him, they're rhinos, Republican in name only, because they're not real Republicans if they're against President Trump. They're rhinos. Okay, so Trump, thumbs up for my decision to strike Iran without having any rhinos or Democrats in Congress try to stop me. So there goes thumbs up for that. Okay. Thumbs down that Israel pushed me into military action. I might have forced them. So President Trump says here, it's possible it was just the other way around, that I forced Israel to go ahead. Even though they went first, I still may have forced them to strike at that point. And he's saying that because from the negotiations we were having with Iran, from those negotiations, it was my strong feeling they were going to attack first. I know. So basically, President Trump is saying here that he had a strong feeling. Okay, so he's not alluding to any specific intelligence. He's saying he had a strong feeling based upon the way negotiations were going, and he ordered this Epic Fury operation to commence upon that. Now here is I'm doing a flashback here because President George W. Bush, when he went into Iraq, he said that it was God's, that he was receiving a message from God, also not based on evidence, solid evidence, but he was receiving George Bush, when the George Bush slipped, and he slipped up, and he was condemning the attack, the Russian attack on Ukraine. President George W. Bush was doing that a couple of years ago or so, and he was condemning that a few years ago. He was condemning that attack of the Russians on Ukraine. And in the context of that, what happened was George W. Bush slips up, calls Iraq invasion unjustified and brutal. So what he does is he calls that brutal, and he slips up, and he goes like this. He says basically he confuses Ukraine with he confuses Ukraine with his decision on Iraq when he was president. We went into Iraq, the Iraq War. So here he is. Here's former President George W. Bush. he claimed he was on a mission from God. At that time, I'm reading it here. He claimed he was on a mission from God when he launched the invasion of Afghanistan and Iraq. But he was only here, he just mentioned Iraq here. So here is how it went. Again, President George W. Bush, kind of confusing. You could call it a Freudian slip if you want to. Those people who are familiar with Freudian psychology, that he came out, that he said Iraq instead of Ukraine. And here he goes.
In contrast, Russian elections are rigged. Political opponents are imprisoned or otherwise eliminated from participating in the electoral process. The result is an absence of checks and balances in Russia and the decision of one man to launch a wholly unjustified and brutal invasion of Iraq.
There he goes. Everybody.
Anyway.
See, they laughed because he said Ukraine. He meant to say Ukraine. There he goes. So anyway, what I did, I kind of came up with this cartoon I did many years ago when we went into Iraq around the time, and this was a cartoon that I did. Okay, we gotta tone this down here. Here it goes. Okay, let's get this off here. There we go. Okay, I forgot to turn that off. There. Okay, now this was a cartoon I did many years ago when I was beginning my cartoons. Here we had VP Cheney in Dreamland during Bush briefing on California fires. So Vice President Cheney, who was President George W. Bush, Vice President at the time, was very strong and adamant about, after 9/11, about going into Iraq. They felt they had nuclear weapons of mass destruction. They were building that, and they had chemical weapons and all that and that. And so you had Colin Powell saying, if you go into the Pottery Barn, when you break a thing, something in the Pottery Barn, you own it. And you go to a Pottery Barn, Iraq, comparing that, and then sure enough, that's what happened here with Iraq. And now this is a cartoon, a primitive cartoon of mine. VP Cheney in Dreamland during Bush briefing on California fires. So this is how I drew President George W. Bush back then, and this is how I drew Dick Cheney, and he's saying here, bombs away. In other words, he's dropping bombs on California fire, because Cheney was so gung ho about attacking Iraq. He was really the force behind the administration in many respects. I'm not going to go farther than that to say he was a big force in that. And there he was. He's fantasizing about dropping bombs on California wildfire to put it out. That's something I did way back, and I just came across it, and I figured I'd present that to you with that, kind of fit it in. Okay, so this was the first cartoon here, and again here, President Trump, again, defending himself against this, and he's saying, thumbs up for my decision to strike Iran without having any rhinos or Democrats in Congress try to stop me. Thumbs down that Israel pushed me into military action. I might have forced them because from the negotiations we were having with Iran, it was my strong feeling they were going to attack first. So he based it on a strong feeling and not on concrete intelligence. And President George W. Bush based it on his relationship with God and what he was hearing from him. So at that time, and he made that Freudian slip. All right, I repeated myself a little bit. Now, the second part of the cartoon here is this. Now, here, a lot of people concerned now about sleeper cells who've been here who are Iranians, sponsored by Iran. They may be from other countries, but terrorists from other countries, wherever they are backed by Iran. They've been here a while, and President Trump has always said that Joe Biden they were here because Joe Biden let them in, and that's how he always alludes to that when he's asked about this question. He always goes back to Joe Biden, who let all these people into the country who with no security. They all flooded into the United States, and among them certainly were sleeper cells sponsored by Iran. So President Trump has never specifically talked about addressing that. He just always goes to allude to it's Biden who were here because we have these sleeper cells because Biden let them in, which is you can't deny that President Biden opened the door and that sleeper cells came in during that time period. The mathematics are there that the probabilities are very great that happened. Okay, I used to be a math teacher, so I studied probability theory and all that business. So when I was going to school, so I know the probabilities are that some sleeper terrorists did come into the country sponsored by Iran when Biden opened the doors. They'd come to America, Now, I'll give you another thing, in probability, that Kash Patel fired so many people from the FBI, so many intelligence experts who've been working there for years, who have tons of experience, and so did Tulsi Gabbard fire a lot of people from the different from her area, okay, of her intelligence area of Director of National Intelligence. She fired a lot of people there, all across the board, because she was responsible for the FBI, the CIA, and all that. She's not responsible for firing these people, but within the context of her own authority, where she had control, she fired a lot of people. She's Director of DNI, Director of National Intelligence. She fired a lot of people who were sort of who did not treat President Trump, who had a history of different things, of being let's just say who were involved in litigation, or who testified, or in some way was connected to any hostile action against President Trump. I wouldn't say hostile, legal action, because these people were doing their job, what they were told to do at the time. They had no hostility towards President Trump. They were just doing their job. A lot of them, hundreds of them were fired. Between Kash Patel and Tulsi Gabbard, hundreds of people were fired who had lots and lots of many years of experience, who I'm sure were, and the probabilities there are that some of those people were also experts on dealing with Iranian intelligence, on their sleeper cells and this and that. So the probabilities are there that many of those people who we could have used today are gone. 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 Because of all these mass firings between Kash Patel at the FBI and Tulsi Gabbard. So there you have the probabilities. Joe Biden let the sleeper cells in, and these people probably fired some of the investigators and experts who were working on kicking them out and putting them in jail and getting rid of them. So there you have the perfect storm, folks. All right, I ain't gonna go no more than that, but that's just a probability speaking. This is me as a math teacher talking about probabilities here. Those are the probabilities on both sides of the fence. All right, now here you go. There's President Reagan up there in the Oval Office, President Donald Trump here with his USA cap on in the Oval Office with Tulsi. Let's get a close in on Tulsi Gabbard here. Here she is. There's Tulsi giving thumbs up. And here's President Trump here. And basically what's going on here is that President Trump is praising Tulsi, and they're in the Oval Office, and President Trump goes like this. He goes, Without Tulsi's fantastic leadership and exceptional courage and patriotism, I am confident the U.S. is prepared to deal with Iran's sleeper cells. So she's saying, President Trump is saying that he's confident with Tulsi's experience, with exceptional courage and patriotism, and confidence in the U.S. is prepared to deal with Iran's sleeper cells. Okay, Tulsi's got it. She's going to handle it. Okay. And that are here, those sleeper cells that are here because of President Joe Biden. So he's in his conversation, he's again ejecting that are here because of President Joe Biden. That's kind of the punchline to this cartoon here. Okay, and there was the Oval Office here with President Trump and Reagan. President Reagan here don't look too happy about what's going on. I just animated that a little bit. And Tulsi Gabbard here with thumbs up in response to President Trump, complimenting her and praising her for her leadership and exceptional courage and patriotism and confidence that the U.S. is prepared to deal with Iran's sleeper cells, with Tulsi Gabbard as Director of National Intelligence, which supervises over coordinates. Her position is to coordinate and rule out and take out intelligence that's irrelevant and present President Trump with the clear basic facts of what the situation is and the threats that America faces at that every moment in time, and to rule out stuff that's extraneous and not as relevant or needing as immediate action. So she's a filter for all these agencies, the CIA, FBI, and many others, about 17 or other agencies that she's over. So Tulsi Gabbard is the filter here, and President Trump gets the relevant information that she feels is necessary for him to have. So basically, you could assume that Tulsi was in for the Operation Epic Fury that we saw play out, and we're seeing the results of that across the Mideast now with these bombings of our embassies and some of our men getting killed miraculously. They say only 6, but I mean that's hard to imagine. By now, as we're speaking this morning here, that much more, I'm sure, God forbid, are going to meet that fate. If it's again a mathematical probability. God forbid, we don't want that, and that's it. And we again, Marco Rubio did expound on saying we're going to take out those their missiles and their drones and their short-range missiles and drones and all the technology that they put together to launch all this stuff they have. And they say thousands of drones and missiles and what have you. And the argument there is that in another year, they would have been, these stuff was shielding their nuclear weapons, because people would be afraid to do anything because they would have so many of them, and that Rubicon line of protection that they were building with their drones and their missiles would be so great that nobody would dare. So that was another argument that Marco Rubio made. All these are logical arguments. The question is, why didn't they go to Congress and have the procedures being going along, and have they got plans for how they're going to deal with it and implement this? It seems we're getting different views from everybody about different things, and that is the basis of a lot of criticism, is people understand that these things are true about what's going on there and the threat they posed. It's the manner of that it's just not being coordinated properly, and that is basically the criticism in general. All right, folks, thank you for watching my video. God bless you. Hang in there. I say it again, hang in there through all this, and I'll see you next time. Bye.